"You are cursed." Those were the first words Kira remembered hearing as a child, whispered by her own mother with a mixture of fear and disgust as she traced the strange markings that wound across her daughter's skin like rivers of ink beneath the surface. The lines were not tattoos. They were not scars from any wound. They simply existed, black and intricate, spiraling from her left shoulder down her arm, across her ribs, disappearing beneath the fabric of whatever clothes she wore to hide. Them. The elders called them the mark of the Forsaken. The other children called her cursed. And Kira, after 23 years of being treated like a shadow in her own pack, had learned to call herself nothing at all. She existed in the spaces between, neither fully Omega nor fully anything else. Just a body marked by something no one understood and everyone feared. The morning King Thorn arrived in the village of Ashwood, Kira was doing what she always did, keeping her head down. She scrubbed the stone steps of the pack house, her hands raw from the cold water and harsh soap, her hair falling forward to hide her face. She heard the commotion before she saw anything. Horses, the thunder of hooves on packed earth, the sharp commands of warriors who moved with lethal precision. She did not look up. She had learned long ago that looking up, making eye contact, drawing any attention to herself, only invited pain. So she kept scrubbing, kept her eyes on the gray stone, kept breathing in the shallow, quiet way that made her invisible. Everyone to the square. Now. The voice of Alpha Marcus, the leader of her pack, rang out with an authority that sent villagers scattering from their homes and workshops. Kira's hands stilled on the brush, her heart hammered against her ribs. Gatherings meant scrutiny. Scrutiny meant someone might notice her. Someone might see. She wanted to slip away, to disappear into the forest as she often did, but Marcus's beta was already moving. Through the area, physically pulling people toward the central square. There was no escape. She stood slowly, wiping her wet hands on her worn dress, and joined the flow of bodies moving toward the heart of the village. The square was packed with people by the time she arrived, and Kira instinctively moved to the very back, pressing herself against the rough bark of an old oak tree. From here, she could see everything without being seen. The visiting party stood in the center of the square, and, even from a distance, Kira could feel the power radiating from them. These were not ordinary wolves. These were warriors from the capital, from the king's own guard. Their armor was dark, polished to a mirror shine, and each one of them carried themselves with the kind of confidence that came from knowing they were the most dangerous thing in any room. But it was the man at the center of the formation who stole the breath from every person present. King Thorn. Even Kira, who had spent her life avoiding pack politics and royal gossip, knew his name. He was a legend. The youngest Alpha King in 3 centuries, crowned at 25 after leading a brutal campaign to unify the fractured wolf kingdoms under one banner. He was said to be ruthless in battle, brilliant in strategy, and completely unmated despite being 32 years old. The rumors whispered that he refused the mate bond, that he had rejected every suitable female presented to him, that he kept his heart as cold and locked as the iron vaults beneath his castle. Looking at him now, Kira believed every word. He was tall, easily a head above his own guards, with shoulders that spoke of raw power barely contained beneath his black coat. His hair was dark as midnight, cut short but not military precise, falling slightly across his forehead in a way that only emphasized the sharp angles of his face. But it was his eyes that made Kira's stomach twist with something she could not name. They were silver, not gray, not blue, but true silver, like molten metal. And they swept across the gathered crowd with an intensity that made grown warriors shift their weight nervously. This was a man who missed nothing. This was a predator assessing prey. "I seek something that was stolen from the royal archives 60 years ago," Thorn said, his voice carrying across the silent square without any need to shout. The timbre of it was deep, resonant, the kind of voice that demanded obedience without asking. A map. Not drawn on parchment or carved into stone, but something far more precious. A map recorded in bone. It was taken from the capital during the Schism Wars and has not been seen since. I have reason to believe it passed through this territory. Kira felt her markings burn. It was not painful exactly, but it was impossible to ignore. A heat that spread from her shoulder down through every line and curve of the intricate patterns that marked her skin. She pressed harder against the tree, trying to will the sensation away, trying to become even smaller, even less noticeable. This had nothing to do with her. It could not have anything to do with her. Her markings were a curse, not a map. They were the reason she was nothing, no one, invisible. Alpha Marcus stepped forward, his posture respectful but wary. Your Majesty, we have heard of no such artifact in our territory. Our records go back 200 years. There is nothing about a bone map. Thorne's silver eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made the Alpha visibly tense. Records can be incomplete. Memories can be selective. I am not here to ask permission, Marcus. I am here to search. You will provide access to your archives, your elders' collections, and any private holdings your pack members might have. My men will conduct a thorough investigation. The words were polite, but the tone was absolute. This was not a request. This was an order from a king to a subordinate, and everyone present understood the consequences of refusal. Marcus bowed his head in submission. Of course, Your Majesty. Whatever you need. My pack is at your service. Kira began to edge backward, moving with agonizing slowness toward the gap between buildings that would let her slip away unnoticed. The burning in her markings had intensified, a strange pulling sensation, as if something beneath her skin was trying to move, trying to respond to something in the air. She needed to leave. She needed to be anywhere but here. She had almost made it to the gap when a voice cut through the murmur of the dispersing crowd. You there. Stop. Kira froze. Every muscle in her body locked. She did not turn around. She could not turn around. If she was very still, very quiet, maybe whoever had spoken was talking to someone else. Maybe she was still invisible. The girl by the oak tree, I said stop. The voice was closer now, and with a sinking certainty that felt like drowning, Kira recognized it. One of the king's guards. She turned slowly, keeping her eyes down, her shoulders hunched, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. The guard was striding toward her, his hand resting on the pommel of his sword. Come here. She moved forward on trembling legs, acutely aware that every eye in the square had turned to watch. She could feel their judgment, their disgust, their relief that it was her, and not them, being singled out. When she was a few feet from the guard, she stopped, still refusing to lift her. Gaze. Name, he demanded. Kira. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Kira what? She hesitated. She did not have a family name. Omegas without families, without value, did not get that dignity. Just Kira. The guard made a sound of disgust. Show me your arms. Kira's blood went cold. Her arms, the markings. They were always covered, always hidden beneath long sleeves no matter the weather. To expose them meant inviting hatred, inviting punishment, inviting all the reasons people had. Spent her entire life telling her she should not exist. I do not understand, she whispered. Your arms. Now. The king wants to see everyone's markings. Pack tattoos, identification scars, anything. It is part of the search. She could not breathe, could not think. Her hands shook as she slowly pushed up the sleeves of her dress. First the right arm, which bore only the faint marks of old burns from kitchen work, and then the left. The moment her left arm was exposed, the guard's expression changed. His eyes widened. His hand tightened on his sword hilt. What in the name of the moon is that? He breathed. The markings were impossible to miss. They covered her entire arm from shoulder to wrist, intricate black lines that wove and spiraled in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost like writing in a language no one had spoken in centuries. The burning sensation was stronger now, and Kira watched in horror as the lines seemed to shimmer slightly in the afternoon light, as if they were responding to being seen. "It is nothing," she said quickly, desperately. "It is a birth defect. A curse. Please, I need to go. I have work." "Marcus." The guard's voice cracked like a whip. "Marcus, get over here, now." The Alpha appeared within seconds, and when he saw Kira standing there with her arm exposed, his face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, recognition, fear. "This is no concern of yours," Marcus said to the guard, his voice tight. "She is nobody, Omega with a deformity. She has nothing to do with royal business." But the guard was not looking at Marcus anymore. He was looking past him, and Kira followed his gaze with a sense of doom settling over her like a physical weight. King Thorn was walking toward them. The crowd parted before him like water around stone, people actually stumbling over themselves to get out of his path. His silver eyes were locked on Kira with such focused intensity that she felt pinned in place, a butterfly on a collector's board. She could not move, could not run, could not do anything but stand there as the most powerful Alpha in the known world, close the distance between them with purposeful strides. When he was close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his silver irises, close enough that his scent hit her like a physical force, pine and winter frost and something darker, something that made her wolf whimper inside her chest. He stopped. "Look at me." The command was soft, but it was absolute. Kira's eyes lifted against her will, drawn by the sheer force of his presence. The moment their gazes met, the world tilted. It was not a metaphor. Reality actually seemed to shift, to realign itself around this single point of connection. Kira felt something snap into place inside her chest, a bond she had never felt before, had never expected to feel, blazing to life with such intensity that she gasped aloud. The mate bond. Impossible, inconceivable, but undeniable. She saw the recognition in Thorn's eyes, saw silver flare to almost white as he felt it too. And for one heartbeat, she saw something that looked like shock, like vulnerability, cross his features. Then his expression shuddered, became cold and controlled once more. But his voice when he spoke carried an edge she could not identify. "Your arm. Give it to me." She extended her left arm without thought, without the ability to refuse him. His hand closed around her wrist, and at the contact of his skin. Against hers, the markings flared with heat and light. Kira cried out, stumbling forward, and Thorn caught her with his other arm, steadying her against his chest. Through the shock and confusion, she felt his sharp intake of breath, felt the tension in his entire body as he stared down at her arm. The markings were glowing now, a soft silver-blue light that pulsed in time with her heartbeat, and as Thorn's fingers traced the lines with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything she had. Heard about him, shapes began to emerge from the pattern. Mountains, rivers, stars in specific constellations, landmarks. The map was revealing itself. "Impossible," Thorn whispered, but his voice carried across the silent square. "The lunar map. It is real. And it is alive." He looked down at Kira, and the intensity in his silver eyes made her feel like she was being seen for the first time in her entire life. Truly seen. Not as a curse, not as a mistake, but as something that mattered. Something important. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Where did you get these markings?" "I was born with them," Kira managed to say, though her voice shook. "They have always been there. I do not know what they are. I do not know what they mean." Thorn's grip on her wrist tightened fractionally. "You do not understand what you carry. This is not a curse. This is the lunar map. created by the first moon goddess herself and entrusted to her daughter, the first queen of the wolves. It was said to be lost when the royal bloodline died out 300 years ago. But if you carry it, if it is written into your very skin, then you are not nobody. You are the last descendant of the lunar queens. The square erupted in chaos. Gasps, shouts of disbelief. Alpha Marcus stumbled backward as if physically struck. But Kira barely heard any of it over the roaring in her own ears. Descendant of queens. Her. The cursed Omega who scrubbed floors and hid in shadows. It was madness. It had to be madness. No, she breathed. That cannot be true. You are wrong. I am nothing. I am no one. I am cursed. Thorn's expression softened, just slightly, and when he spoke again, his voice was low enough that only she could hear. You are my mate, and you are far more than you have been allowed to believe. But right now, you are in danger. Every wolf who knows the legends will want what you carry. Some to protect it, others to destroy it. You are coming with me. It was not a request. Before Kira could process what was happening, before she could argue or resist, Thorn released her wrist and swept her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. She gasped, instinctively clutching at his coat, and felt his arm tighten around her back, holding her securely against his chest. Marcus, Thorn said, his voice carrying the full weight of royal command. Consider your pack under my direct protection. No one speaks of what happened here today. No one. If word of this leaks and I discover the source came from Ashwood, I will return, and it will not be a pleasant visit. Marcus bowed so low his forehead nearly touched the ground. Yes, Your Majesty. You have my word. My pack's silence is guaranteed. Thorn nodded once, then turned and strode toward his horse, still carrying Kira. His guards fell into formation around them without need for orders, creating a protective barrier. As they moved through the crowd, Kira saw faces she had known her entire life staring at her with expressions ranging from awe to envy to naked hatred. She saw the head Omega, the woman who had spent years making Kira's life miserable, looking like she might be sick. She saw the warriors who had mocked her looking suddenly uncertain. She saw her own mother, standing at the edge of the crowd, her hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met for one brief moment, and in that moment, Kira understood something she had never quite put into words before. Her mother had known. Had always known that the markings meant something. Had spent Kira's entire life lying to her, hiding her, treating her like garbage to keep her safe, or perhaps to keep herself safe from the implications of what Kira truly was. The betrayal of it hit harder than any physical blow, and Kira looked away first, burying her face against Thorn's chest as he lifted her onto his massive black stallion and mounted behind her in one fluid motion. His arms came around her, caging her against his body as he took the reins, and despite everything, despite the fear and confusion and world-tilting revelations, Kira felt something she had not felt in years. Safe. In the arms of a king she did not know, she felt safe. If you are enjoying this story, do not forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories like this one. The ride to the capital took 3 days, and by the end of the first day, Kira was certain of 3 things. First, that King Thorn was the most confusing man she had ever encountered. He was capable of terrifying coldness, barking orders at his men with a voice that brooked no argument. Yet he had insisted on personally ensuring she had the warmest blankets, the best portions of food, and a tent of her own each night, even though it meant he and his guards had less comfort. Second, that the mate bond was going to drive her insane. Every time Thorn came near her, every accidental brush of hands, every moment his scent surrounded her, the bond sang. In her chest, demanding acknowledgement, demanding closeness, demanding things she did not understand and could not begin to process. And third, that she was absolutely, completely unprepared for any of this. They traveled fast, but not recklessly, and Thorn kept the group small. Just 6 guards, all of them clearly chosen for their loyalty and discretion. They spoke little, these men, but Kira noticed the way they watched the tree line, the way their hands never strayed far from their weapons. They were expecting trouble. On the second night, as Kira sat by the fire trying to force down the stew one of the guards had prepared, Thorn finally approached her. He had been avoiding her, she realized. All day, he had ridden near the front of the group, while she was kept safely in the middle, and at camp, he had busied himself with maps and strategy discussions. But now, as the others settled into their watches and sleep rotations, he crossed the clearing and lowered himself onto the log. Beside her, the silence stretched between them, not quite comfortable, but not hostile either. Finally, without looking at her, Thorn spoke. "You must have questions." Kira nearly laughed. Questions. She had 1,000 questions, 1,000,000. But the one that came out was quieter, more vulnerable than she intended. Why did you not reject the bond? The moment you felt it, you could have severed it. Everyone knows you refuse all mates. So why not me? Thorn's jaw tightened, and for a moment thought he would not answer. Then he turned to look at her, and the expression in his silver eyes was complicated. "I have spent 12 years avoiding the mate bond," he said quietly. "I have rejected 17 suitable females, endured the judgment of my council, and accepted that I would rule alone. Do you know why?" She shook her head. "Because of a prophecy. When I was 20, a seer told me that my fated mate would be the death of me, that I would love her so completely, so desperately, that I would sacrifice everything, including my kingdom, to keep her. That my love would make me weak, and that weakness would be my end." Kira's breath caught. "So you avoided the bond to protect yourself, and your kingdom?" Thorn nodded slowly. "For 12 years, I believed that was the right choice. The smart choice. Then I saw you standing in that village square, looking like you wanted to disappear, and the bond snapped into place with such force that I nearly fell to my knees. In that moment, I understood something the prophecy did not make clear. Refusing the bond does not protect you from destiny. It only delays it. And when destiny catches up, it hits twice as hard." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and traced one finger along the glowing lines of the map on her arm. "You are my mate, and you are the heir to a bloodline that was supposed to be extinct. Both of those facts make you extraordinarily dangerous to me, but they also make you impossible to abandon. So no, I did not reject the bond, but I cannot accept it either. Not yet. Not until I understand what it means. What you mean." Kira looked down at their hands, at the way his finger followed the lines of the map with reverent care, and felt something crack open inside her chest. "I do not want to be your death," she whispered. "I do not want to be anyone's death. I just want to understand what I am. What these markings mean. Why I was treated like garbage my entire life when apparently I am supposed to be royalty. None of this makes sense." Thorn's hand closed around hers, and the contact sent warmth flooding through the bond. "When we reach the capital, there is someone you need to meet. The Keeper of Archives. She is the oldest living wolf, nearly 400 years old, and she remembers the time before the Lunar Queens fell. If anyone can tell you what you are, what you carry, it is her. But Kira..." He waited until she looked up at him. "You need to prepare yourself. Knowledge has a price. Understanding who you really are might be harder than living in ignorance. Are you ready for that?" She thought about her mother's tears, about the years of cruelty and isolation, about the way she had learned to make herself invisible just to survive. She thought about the feel of Thorn's arms around her, the strange rightness of it, the way the bond hummed between them even now. I have spent 23 years being afraid, she said quietly. Afraid of my markings. Afraid of being seen, afraid of existing. I am tired of being afraid. So yes, I am ready. Something flickered in Thorn's eyes. Respect, maybe, or something warmer. Good, he said simply. Then he stood, and the loss of his presence beside her felt like a physical cold. Get some rest. Tomorrow we reach the capital, and your life changes forever. Whether for better or worse remains to be seen. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight. But Kira sat there for a long time, staring at the glowing lines on her arm, wondering what price knowledge would exact, and whether she was truly as ready as she had claimed. The capital city of Lunaris was unlike anything Kira had ever imagined. Ashwood had been a village of perhaps 300 wolves, wooden buildings clustered around a central square, dirt roads that turned to mud when it rained. Lunaris was a sprawling metropolis of stone and steel and glass that stretched as far as she could. See, towers rose toward the sky, connected by bridges that defied physics. The streets were paved with smooth stone that actually glowed faintly in the fading afternoon light, and everywhere she looked there were wolves, thousands of them, warriors and merchants and craftsmen and scholars, all moving with purpose through the organized chaos of the capital. But it was the palace that stole her breath. It sat at the heart of the city like a crown jewel, all white stone and silver spires that caught the light and threw it back in dazzling patterns. The walls were carved with the history of the wolf kingdoms, massive reliefs showing battles and alliances and the rise and fall of dynasties. As they approached the main gates, Kira felt the weight of history pressing down on her, the awareness that she was about to enter a place where queens had once walked, queens whose blood supposedly ran in her veins. The guards at the gate saluted Thorn with fists over hearts, and the massive doors swung open without a word being spoken. They rode directly into a courtyard that was larger than Kira's entire village, where dozens of servants and officials immediately swarmed forward. Thorn dismounted first, then reached up to help Kira down, and she tried not to notice the way conversation stopped when people saw his hands on her waist, the way speculation rippled through the gathered crowd like wind through wheat. "Dismissed," Thorn said sharply, and the courtyard cleared with impressive speed. He kept his hand on the small of Kira's back as he guided her toward a side entrance, away from the grand front doors where she imagined official delegations were received. "I am taking you to my private wing," he said quietly, as they walked through corridors that seemed to glow with embedded light. "You will have quarters connected to mine. It is the most secure part of the palace, and the only place I can guarantee your safety until we understand what we are dealing with." Kira wanted to argue, wanted to say she did not need his protection, but the truth was she had no idea what she needed. Everything was happening too fast. 3 days ago she had been scrubbing floors. Now she was walking through a palace with a king at her side, supposedly the heir to a bloodline of queens, supposedly destined to be the mate of the most powerful alpha in the world. It was too much. It was all too much. Thorn must have sensed her distress, because he stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands coming up to grip her shoulders gently. "Breathe," he commanded, and she obeyed without thought. 1 breath. 2. 3. "I know this is overwhelming, but you are stronger than you think. You survived 23 years being treated as less than nothing. You can survive this." "What if I cannot?" The words came out small, frightened, and she hated how weak she sounded. "What if I am not who you think I am? What if the markings are just some cosmic accident and I really am nothing?" Thorn's grip tightened, and he leaned down until they were eye to eye. "Then you are still my mate, still under my protection, still worth more than anyone in that miserable village ever gave you credit for. But Kira, I do not believe in accidents. Not ones this significant. You are meant to be here. The question is why, and we are going to find out." Before she could respond, a door at the end of the corridor opened, and a woman stepped through. Kira's first thought was that she was looking at time made flesh. The woman was ancient. Her hair was pure white, falling past her waist in a thick braid, and her face was so lined with wrinkles that reading her expression was like reading a map. But her eyes were young, sharp, and brilliant green, and they fixed on Kira with an intensity that made the younger woman want to hide behind Thorn. "So," the old woman said, her voice surprisingly strong, "the rumors are true. You found her. The last lunar queen has returned." Thorn inclined his head respectfully. "Keeper, thank you for coming so quickly. This is Kira. Kira, this is the Keeper of Archives, Althea. She has served the crown for nearly 4 centuries. If anyone can help you understand what you are, it is her." Althea moved forward with a grace that belied her age, and when she reached Kira, she held out one gnarled hand. "Let me see the map, child." Kira hesitated, then extended her left arm. The moment Althea's fingers touched the markings, they flared to life, glowing so brightly that Kira had to look away. She heard Althea's sharp intake of breath, heard Thorn move closer as if to intervene. But the old woman made a dismissive gesture. "Peace, Your Majesty. The map recognizes one of the old blood. I am the last living wolf who was born before the lunar queens fell. It remembers me." Althea's fingers traced the glowing lines with a tenderness that brought unexpected tears to Kira's eyes. "Oh, child, what they did to you, what they made you. Believe about yourself. This is not a curse. This is the greatest blessing that can be bestowed on a wolf. You carry the memory of the world itself." "I do not understand," Kira whispered. Althea looked up at her, and there was sorrow in those ancient eyes. The lunar queens were not simply rulers, girl. They were the balance, the bridge between the physical world and the spirit realm. The first queen, Callista, was the daughter of the moon goddess herself, and she was given 3 gifts to help guide her people. Wisdom in the form of a crown that let her see truth. Power in the form of a scepter that could command the very elements. And memory in the form of a map that recorded every important place, every sacred site, every source of power in the known world. The crown and scepter were lost when the royal line was slaughtered 3 centuries ago. But the map was different. It was not an object that could be stolen or destroyed. It was a legacy, passed down through blood, written into the skin of each new queen at the moment of her birth. Kira's breath came in shallow gasps. But the royal line died out. Everyone knows that. King Marcus the Usurper killed the last queen and all her daughters. Althea's expression hardened. He killed the queen and 6 daughters, but there was a 7th, the youngest. She was only an infant, smuggled out of the palace by a loyal servant the night before the massacre. The servant ran as far as she could, changing territories, changing names, eventually settling in a small village far from the capital where no one would think to look for royal blood. That servant's name was Helena, and the baby she carried was named Seraphine. Kira's vision swam. "That is not possible. You are saying I am descended from that baby, from the lost princess." "Not just descended," Althea said gently. "You are the direct line, mother to daughter, unbroken for 300 years. Your great-great-grandmother was Seraphine, and each generation, the map tried to emerge, tried to claim its heir, but it could not, because the bloodline was in hiding. The power was dormant. Until you. You are the first in 10 generations born with enough latent power for the map to fully manifest. You are not cursed, Kira. You are the true heir to the lunar throne." The world tilted. Kira's knees buckled, and if Thorn had not been there to catch her, she would have hit the floor. He lowered them both down, keeping her cradled against his chest, while she tried to process what she had just heard. True heir. Lunar throne. daughter of the moon goddess's bloodline. It was insanity. It was impossible. But the markings on her arm glowed with truth, pulsing in time with her racing heart, and she knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that Althea was not lying. What do you think will happen next? Leave your predictions in the comments below. How? Kira finally managed to ask. How did no one know? How did my family hide for 300 years? Althea settled herself onto a nearby bench with a sigh. Because they were very, very careful. And because the world wanted to believe the royal line was dead. It was easier that way. Cleaner. King Marcus established a new order, and no one wanted to challenge it. But your family carried the secret, passed it down mother to daughter, always with the warning to hide, to stay small, to never draw attention. Your mother knew what you were the moment you were born with the map visible on your skin. She must have been terrified. Kira thought of her mother's face, twisted with fear and disgust when she looked at her marked daughter. Thought of the years of coldness, of being pushed aside, of being told she was cursed. She hated me, Kira said flatly. She treated me like I was diseased. Althea's expression softened. She was afraid, child. Fear makes people cruel. She knew that if anyone recognized the map, if anyone made the connection, you would be killed. Every descendant of the Lunar Queens has been hunted for 3 centuries. Marcus's line has held power for so long because they systematically eliminated any potential threat to their claim. Your mother kept you alive the only way she knew how, by making you invisible. By making me believe I was worthless, Kira corrected, and she could not keep the bitterness from her voice. Thorn's arms tightened around her. What is done is done. The question now is what happens next. He looked at Althea. If word of this gets out, every power-hungry alpha in the 7 kingdoms will come for her. Some will want to use her. Others will want to eliminate the threat to the current order. And still others will want to claim her for themselves, to legitimize their own grabs for power by mating the true heir. Althea nodded gravely. Which is why the bond between you is both your greatest protection and your greatest vulnerability, Your Majesty. If the council learns you have found your mate and that she is the lunar heir, they will demand you formalize the bond immediately. Use it to strengthen your claim, to unite the old power with the new. But they will also fear her, fear what she represents. There will be those who argue she is too dangerous to live. Prophecy or no prophecy. What prophecy? Kira demanded, looking between them. Thorn mentioned it before, but he did not explain. What does it say? Thorn exchanged a long look with Althea, and the old woman inclined her head, giving him permission to speak. When I was crowned 12 years ago, Thorn began slowly, the High Seer performed the traditional blessing ritual. But in the middle of the ceremony, she went rigid. Her eyes rolled back, and she spoke in a voice that was not her own. She said, "The lone wolf will find his moon, and in her light, he will burn. He will sacrifice crown and kingdom, blood and bone, for love that should not be. And when the burning is complete, the old queens will rise, and the world will be remade." She collapsed immediately after, and did not remember speaking. But the words were witnessed by 200 nobles, and recorded by the royal scribes. Kira stared at him. "And you think that prophecy is about me? About us?" Thorn's silver eyes held hers. I did not want to believe it. I spent 12 years running from it. But yes, I think you are my moon. And I think this, all of this, is the beginning of whatever the prophecy meant by burning and remaking. He stood, lifting Kira with him and setting her gently on her feet. Which is why we need to be smart, strategic. We cannot hide what you are forever, but we can control how the information spreads. Althea, I need you to begin researching the map, what it shows, what power it might unlock. Everything. Quietly. Use only your most trusted assistants. Althea bowed. As you command, Your Majesty. Thorn turned to Kira. And you need to learn how to defend yourself, how to use whatever power that map gives you, because I can protect you from external threats, but I cannot protect you from what is already inside you, trying to emerge. Tomorrow, training begins. Kira wanted to argue, wanted to say she was not a warrior, was not strong enough, was not anything enough. But the look in Thorn's eyes stopped her. He believed she could do this, and after a lifetime of being told she was worthless, having someone believe in her, especially someone like him, was a gift she could not dismiss. All right, she said quietly. Tomorrow, we train. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of physical and mental exhaustion. Thorn had not been exaggerating when he said training would begin. She woke before dawn each day to work with his personal guard, learning basic combat forms, how to fall without breaking bones, how to use her smaller size as an advantage. Her body, soft from years of menial labor that required endurance but not strength, slowly began to change. Muscles developed where she had only had skin and bone. Her reflexes sharpened. She stopped flinching every time someone moved suddenly near her. In the afternoons, she worked with Althea, learning the history of the lunar queens, studying ancient texts written in languages she did not speak, but that the map on her arm seemed to understand, translating through sensation and instinct, rather than words. And in the evenings, she was with Thorn. They did not speak much during these times. He would work on correspondence or strategy while she read, both of them sitting in the comfortable silence of his private study, the fire crackling between them. But the mate bond pulled tighter with each passing day, demanding acknowledgement, demanding consummation. Kira felt it like a constant ache in her chest, a yearning that grew stronger every time Thorn's scent surrounded her, every time his hand brushed hers in passing. She knew he felt it too, saw it in the way his jaw tightened when she entered a room, the way his eyes tracked her movements with predatory focus, the careful distance he maintained between them as if afraid what would happen if that distance collapsed. It was Althea who finally explained what was happening. The bond is trying to complete itself, she told Kira one afternoon as they sat in the archives, surrounded by books older than kingdoms. For wolves, especially alpha wolves, the mate bond is not just emotional. It is physical, spiritual, a literal connection between souls. Refusing to complete it causes pain for both parties. The longer you wait, the worse it becomes. Eventually it can drive wolves mad, make them dangerous to themselves and others. How long can we wait? Kira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Althea looked at her with sympathy. Most bonded pairs cannot last more than a moon cycle before the drive becomes overwhelming. It has been 3 weeks. You have perhaps another week? Maybe 2 if you are both extraordinarily strong-willed, before the bond demands completion. Or severance. Can it be severed now, after this long? Althea hesitated. Technically, yes. But severing a bond this strong, especially for an alpha king, would cause damage. Emotional scarring that might never fully heal. It is not recommended unless absolutely necessary. Kira leaned back in her chair, pressing her palms against her eyes. He is afraid the prophecy will come true. That loving me will destroy him. Destroy his kingdom. How am I supposed to accept a bond with someone who sees me? As a potential apocalypse? Perhaps, Althea said gently. The real question is how he is supposed to accept a bond when he has spent his entire reign putting duty before everything else. Thorn was raised to be a weapon child, trained from birth to lead, to conquer, to never show weakness. Love is the ultimate weakness for a man like him. It is not you he fears. It is what feeling for you might make him become. Before Kira could respond, the door to the archives burst open. One of Thorn's Guard stood there, his face pale. "The king requests your presence immediately. Both of you. The council has called an emergency session." Kira's stomach dropped. What happened? The guard's jaw tightened. Lady Seraphine has returned from her northern campaign, and she has demanded an audience with the king about his unmarried status and the succession crisis it creates. Althea cursed, actually cursed, which was so shocking coming from the dignified keeper that Kira almost laughed. Almost. Seraphine. Of course it would be her. "Come, child. We need to get you presentable. If that woman is stirring the pot, things are about to get very complicated very quickly. If you want to see how this story ends, make sure you are subscribed with notifications on." Lady Seraphine was everything Kira was not. Tall, elegant, devastatingly beautiful with silver blonde hair that cascaded down her back like a waterfall, and eyes the color of ice. She wore armor like it was a ball gown. And when Kira entered the council chamber behind Althea, Seraphine's gaze swept over her with the kind of dismissive assessment that made Kira feel like she was back in Ashwood, being evaluated and found wanting. The council chamber was massive, with a table that could seat 40 wolves carved from a single piece of black stone. Thorn sat at the head, his expression carved from the same stone as the table, giving nothing away. Around him sat the various lords and ladies who advised him, the power brokers of So. The wolf kingdoms, and every single one of them was staring at Kira with varying degrees of curiosity, suspicion, and hostility. "Ah," Seraphine said, her voice like honey over steel. "The mysterious guest I have heard so much about. Tell me, Your Majesty, who is this girl who warrants accommodation in your private wing? Surely such an honor should be reserved for someone of significant rank. Or is she merely a new servant who has caught your eye?" The insult was delivered with a smile, but it landed like a slap. Kira felt her face heat, felt the old shame rising up, the voice in her head that said she did not belong here, that Seraphine was right to look at her like dirt on expensive shoes. But then she felt Thorn's power flare, felt his anger ripple through the mate bond like thunder, and she realized he was furious. "Watch your tongue, Seraphine," Thorn said, his voice deadly quiet. "You may have won battles in my name, but that does not give you the right to insult my guests. This is Kira, and she is under my personal protection. That is all the rank she needs." Seraphine's eyes narrowed fractionally, but she inclined her head in acknowledgement. "Of course, Your Majesty. Forgive my rudeness. I was merely surprised. You have never before taken a personal interest in an Omega." The way she said Omega made it sound like an insult, like something distasteful. And Kira felt her wolf stir inside her for the first time in weeks, a growl building in her chest that shocked her with its ferocity. She was not an Omega. Not really. She had never shifted, never connected with her wolf. But the blood of queens ran in her veins, and her wolf knew it, recognized it, and was not pleased about being dismissed. Before Kira could do something stupid like challenge a trained warrior in front of the entire council, Thorn stood. "Enough. Seraphine, you called this session to discuss succession. Make your point." Seraphine smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "Very well. You have ruled for 12 years without taking a mate, without producing an heir. The law is clear. If you reach your 35th year without securing the succession, the council has the right to select your mate for you, or to call for a trial by combat to determine if you are fit to continue ruling. You turn 35 in 6 months. We need a solution." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Thorn's expression did not change, but Kira felt his rage through the bond, a white-hot fury barely contained. "The law also states that the king has until his dying breath to secure an heir. I am not dead yet, Seraphine, and I will choose my own mate in my own time." Seraphine's smile widened. "Then perhaps it is time you made that choice, Your Majesty. The nobles are restless. The packs are questioning your commitment to the future of the kingdom." Give them a Luna. Give them an heir. Or give them a reason to doubt your fitness to rule. It was a challenge. A very public, very deliberate challenge to Thorn's authority. And every eye in the room turned to see how he would respond. Thorn's silver eyes swept the council, and Kira saw the calculation there, the strategic mind weighing options and outcomes. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Very well. If the council requires an answer, I will give one. I have found my fated mate. She stands before you now. Kira is the last surviving heir of the Lunar Queens, descended directly from Queen Callista herself. She carries the lunar map in her very skin, marking her as the true heir to the throne that existed before any of our lines. And she is mine, bonded to me by fate itself. Does that satisfy your concerns about succession? The silence that followed was absolute. Then pandemonium. Lords and ladies erupted from their seats, shouting questions, demands, denials. Seraphine's face went perfectly blank, but Kira saw the rage flashing in those ice-blue eyes, saw the way her hands clenched into fists. Althea moved closer to Kira, her presence a silent support as the world tilted once again. Thorn had just publicly claimed her, had announced her heritage to the most powerful wolves in the kingdom. There was no taking it back, no hiding. Everything had just changed. Over the chaos, Thorn's voice cut like a blade. Silence. The room obeyed instantly. Kira carries the proof of her lineage on her skin. The Keeper of Archives has verified it. She is under my protection, and she will be recognized as my mate and the future Luna Queen. Anyone who has objections can take them up with me personally. He let his power fill the room. Let them feel the weight of his dominance. And one by one, the lords and ladies bowed their heads in submission. All except Seraphine, who stared at Thorn with an expression Kira could not read. If she is truly the lunar heir, Seraphine said carefully, then she must prove it. The old laws stated that a lunar queen must demonstrate her power before she can be recognized. Let her show us. Let her activate the map, reveal its secrets, or admit that she is a fraud wearing the markings of greatness without the power to back them. It was a trap. Kira knew it was a trap. She had no idea how to activate the map, had barely begun to understand what the markings even meant. But before she could say anything, before Thorn could intervene, Althea stepped forward. The lady makes a fair point. Ancient law does require proof of power, but it does not require immediate proof. Kira has only recently discovered her heritage. Give her the traditional period of awakening, 3 moon cycles to learn, to train, to come into her power. Then, if the council still doubts, she will demonstrate her abilities at the solstice ceremony. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. 3 months was a reasonable request. Traditional. Even Seraphine could not argue against it without looking unreasonable. Agreed, Thorn said before anyone else could. Speak. 3 months, and in that time, Kira will be treated with the respect due to my mate and the heir of the Lunar Queens. Anyone who harms her or undermines her answers to me directly. Is that understood? The council bowed in unison. Yes, Your Majesty. Good. This session is concluded. Thorn descended from the dais and crossed directly to Kira, taking her hand in his and leading her from the chamber without another word. His grip was firm, almost painful, and she could feel the tension vibrating through him. They walked in silence through the corridors, past startled servants and curious guards, until they reached his private study. He pulled her inside, locked the door, and then just stood there, his back to her, his shoulders rigid with barely contained emotion. Thorn, Kira said softly, I am sorry. I did not mean for any of this to happen, for you to have to claim me publicly before you were ready. He turned, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. It was not anger. It was something far more complex. "I am not angry at you," he said, his voice rough. "I am angry at myself. I have been a coward, hiding you away, refusing to acknowledge the bond, telling myself I was being strategic when really I was just afraid. Afraid of the prophecy, afraid of what feeling for you might do to me. But watching Seraphine insult you, seeing the council look at you like you were nothing, I realized something." He crossed the space between them in 3 strides and cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I would rather burn for you than spend another day pretending I do not feel this bond. I would rather sacrifice my kingdom than let anyone hurt you. The prophecy was right. You are going to unmake me, and I find that I do not care anymore." His thumb traced the line of her jaw, and Kira felt heat flood through her entire body. "Thorn," she whispered, "what are you saying?" "I am saying I accept the bond, completely, fully. I am yours. Kira, whether that makes me weak or destroys me or remakes the world, I am yours. And if you will have me, I want to complete this bond. Tonight. No more waiting. No more fear." Kira's heart hammered against her ribs. This was what she had wanted, what the bond had been screaming for since the moment they met. But now that the moment was here, now that he was offering himself without reservation, she found herself afraid. "The prophecy says you will sacrifice everything for me. What if completing the bond makes that happen? What if I really am your death?" Thorn smiled, and it transformed his entire face, making him look younger, more alive than she had ever seen him. "Then I die having truly lived, having loved my mate, having chosen my own fate instead of running from it. That is a better end than dying alone in a cold bed, surrounded by crowns and power but empty inside. Kira, I am giving you a choice. Accept the bond. Let me mark you as mine. Let me show you what it means to be cherished. Or reject me, and I will honor that choice, even if it destroys me. But know this, whatever you choose, I am already lost to you, already devoted, already completely, irrevocably in love." The words hit her like a physical force. Love. He loved her. This powerful, terrifying, beautiful man who could have had anyone in the world had chosen her. Wanted her. Loved her. Kira felt tears spill down her cheeks, and she did not bother to wipe them away. "I accept," she whispered. "I accept the bond. I accept you. And Thorn, I think I have been falling in love with you since the moment you looked at me like I mattered, like I was real." His kiss was not gentle. It was claiming, possessive, a brand that seared through her entire body and lit every nerve ending on fire. His hands tangled in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and Kira melted into him, giving herself over to the sensations, to the mate bond that roared between them like a living thing demanding completion. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, and his eyes had gone nearly white with desire and the wolf rising to the surface. "Mine," he growled, and it was not entirely human. "Say it. Tell me you are mine." "Yours," Kira breathed. "I am yours, and you are mine." The words were a vow, a promise, a binding that went deeper than any ceremony. Thorn lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the door that connected the study to his private chambers, and Kira wrapped her arms around his neck, trusting him completely. Trusting that whatever came next, whatever the prophecy demanded, they would face it together. The mate bond pulsed between them, singing with joy and rightness, and as Thorn laid her down on silk sheets that smelled like him, like winter and pine and home, Kira felt the last of her fear fall away. She was not cursed. She was not worthless. She was the mate of a king and the heir of queens, and she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The next morning, Kira woke wrapped in Thorn's arms, her body deliciously sore and her soul feeling more complete than she had ever imagined possible. The mate bond was fully realized now, a golden thread connecting her heart to his, allowing her to feel his emotions as if they were her own. His contentment, his protectiveness, his love. It was overwhelming and perfect and terrifying all at once. Thorn stirred beside her, silver eyes opening to focus on her face, and the smile that curved. His lips was pure male satisfaction. "Good morning, my queen." Kira felt her face heat. "I am not a queen yet. We still have to prove I can access the map's power. Seraphine is going to make the next 3 months hell." Thorn's expression hardened slightly. "Seraphine is going to learn that challenging my mate is a very unwise decision. But you are right. We have work to do. The map chose you, but you need to learn how to use it, how to unlock what it contains. And we only have 3 months." Before the solstice ceremony, he pressed a kiss to her forehead, then reluctantly disentangled himself from her and rose to dress. "Althea will work with you today. I have council meetings I cannot avoid. But tonight, we dine together. And tomorrow, we will make a formal announcement of our bond to the kingdom." Kira sat up, pulling the sheet around herself. "Thorn, are you certain about this? Once we announce it, there is no going back. You will be tied to me. And if I fail to prove my power, if I embarrass you in front of the council, it will damage your rule." He turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze stole her breath. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are my mate, my queen. And nothing, not prophecy, not politics, not Seraphine or the entire council combined, will change that. Trust me, Kira. Trust that I know what I am doing." She wanted to. Moon above, she wanted to trust him, to believe that love could be enough to overcome ancient prophecies and political intrigue. But the small, frightened part of her that had been beaten down for 23 years whispered doubts, whispered that she was not enough, would never be enough, that eventually he would see the truth and regret ever claiming her. Thorn must have sensed her spiraling thoughts through the bond, because he crossed back to the bed and tilted her chin up. "Stop. Whatever you are thinking, whatever your past is telling you, it is wrong. You are enough. More than enough. And I will spend every day for the rest of our lives proving it to you." Then he kissed her again, slower this time, tender, and Kira felt the doubts quiet under the weight of his devotion. When he finally left to attend his meetings, she lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, her fingers unconsciously tracing the glowing lines of the map on her arm. The map that made her special. The map that made her a target. The map that would either prove she was worthy of being a queen or expose her as a fraud. No pressure, she thought wryly. Just the fate of the entire kingdom resting on whether or not she could figure out how to use ancient magic no one had accessed in 300 years. What could possibly go wrong? If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who loves epic romance. Tell me in the comments, did you see this ending coming? The weeks that followed were the hardest of Kira's life, but also the most transformative. Every morning she trained with Thorn's guard, learning not just to fight, but to lead, to command, to move with the confidence of someone who belonged. Every afternoon she studied with Althea, poring over texts about the lunar queens, learning the history she should have been taught from birth. And every evening, she practiced with the map itself, trying to understand how to activate it, how to access the power that supposedly lay dormant in her blood. The map responded to her emotions, she discovered. When she was calm, it glowed softly, barely visible. When she was angry or frightened, it blazed with light, the lines shifting and rearranging to show different locations, different constellations. But she could not control it, could not direct it to show her specific places or reveal specific secrets. It was frustratingly random, like trying to read a book where the words changed every time you looked at the page. Thorn was patient with her frustration, supportive even when she wanted to scream and give up. He held her when she cried, celebrated when she made small breakthroughs, and reminded her constantly that she was not alone in this. The bond between them grew stronger every day, and Kira found herself relying on it, drawing strength from his certainty even when she had none of her own. But not everyone was supportive. Lady Seraphine became a constant thorn in their side, showing up at council meetings with subtle digs about Kira's progress, spreading rumors that the map was nothing more than an elaborate tattoo, questioning whether Kira was truly Thorn's mate or simply a clever Omega who had seduced the king. The attacks were never overt enough to justify punishment, but they chipped away at Kira's confidence, made her second-guess herself, made her wonder if Seraphine might be right. It all came to a head 2 weeks before the solstice ceremony. Kira was in the training yard, working through sword forms with one of the guards, when Seraphine appeared at the edge of the practice area. She watched in silence for several minutes, her ice-blue eyes tracking every movement, and when the guard called for a water break, she approached. "You have improved," Seraphine said, and it sounded like an accusation. "The Omega who could barely lift a sword 2 months ago now moves like a warrior. Almost impressive. Almost." Kira wiped sweat from her forehead and forced herself to meet Seraphine's gaze. "If you have something to say, just say it. I am tired of your veiled insults." Seraphine smiled, sharp and cold. "Very well, I will be direct. You are a liability. The king was one of the strongest rulers we have had in generations before you arrived. Now he is distracted, weakened, so focused on protecting you that he is neglecting his duties. The northern territories are restless. The eastern pacts are questioning his authority. And all because he has bound himself to a girl who cannot even activate her supposed birthright." Kira felt anger flare hot in her chest, felt the map on. Her arm began to glow in response. "Thorn is stronger now than he ever was. The bond between us enhances his power, not diminishes it. You just cannot stand that he chose me instead of you." The moment the words left her mouth, Kira knew she had struck a nerve. Seraphine's carefully controlled expression cracked, revealing raw fury underneath. "You know nothing," Seraphine hissed. "I have served Thorn for a decade, fought his battles, secured his borders, earned my place at his side. And then you appear out of nowhere with your convenient prophecy and your pretty markings, and suddenly I am cast aside. You are nothing. A pretender, wearing the skin of queens." Before Kira could respond, Seraphine moved, faster than Kira had ever seen anyone move, her hand shooting out to grab Kira's marked arm. The contact sent a shock through Kira's system, and the map exploded with light, so bright that both women cried out. For a moment, just a moment, Kira saw something. A vision. A memory. Contained within the map. A great hall filled with wolves, and at the center, a woman wearing a crown of silver and moonstone, her skin covered in the same glowing markings that decorated Kira's arm. Queen Callista, the first lunar queen, and she was speaking, her voice echoing across centuries. The map is not a tool. It is a legacy. A record of every sacred place, every source of power, yes. But more than that, it is a test. Only the worthy can unlock its secrets. Only those who are willing
Sacrifice.
to choose love over power, duty over ambition, can command it. My daughters, know this. The map will choose its own bearer, and when it does, trust that choice. For the moon goddess herself guides the selection. The vision faded, and Kira stumbled backward, gasping. Seraphine released her arm, looking shaken, and for a moment, they just stared at each other. "You saw it too," Kira said. It was not a question. Seraphine nodded slowly. "I saw. The first queen. She was magnificent." Voice held something Kira had never heard from her before. Awe. Respect. But then Seraphine's expression hardened again, walls slamming back into place. "It changes nothing. Vision or no vision, you still have to prove you can control the map, and you are running out of time. She turned and walked away without another word, leaving Kira standing in the training yard, her arms still glowing, her mind racing. That night, Kira told Thorn everything. About the confrontation, about the vision, about what Queen Callista had said. He listened without interrupting, his face thoughtful, and when she finished he was quiet for a long moment. "Sacrifice," he finally said. "Choose love over power. That is what she said?" Kira nodded. "What does it mean? What sacrifice? I do not have any power to give up." Thorn looked at her, and there was something in his silver eyes that made her breath catch. "I think the sacrifice is not yours, Kira. I think it is mine." Before she could ask what he meant, there was a sharp knock on the door. Thorn frowned, crossing to open it, and Kira heard Althea's voice, urgent and worried. "Your Majesty, you need to come to the archives immediately. I have found something critical about the map and the solstice ceremony." They followed Althea through the midnight quiet palace to the archives, where the old woman had spread ancient texts across every available surface. "Here," she said, pointing to a passage written in the old tongue. "I was researching the solstice ceremony, trying to understand what would be required of Kira, and I found this. It is not just a demonstration of power. It is a ritual. The Lunar Queen must use the map to find and open the Gateway of Souls." "The Gateway of Souls," Thorn repeated. "I have never heard of it." Althea's expression was grim. "Because it has been sealed for 3 centuries, ever since the last queen died. The Gateway is the connection between the physical world and the spirit realm. It is where the moon goddess herself can be called upon, where the old magic flows strongest. The Lunar Queens were the guardians of the Gateway, the only ones who could open it and channel its power. When Queen Callista's line was slaughtered, the Gateway sealed itself. No one has been able to access it since." Kira felt cold understanding wash over her. "And at the solstice ceremony, I am expected to open it, to prove I am the true heir by reconnecting the physical and spirit realms." Althea nodded. "Yes, and if you fail, the Council will have grounds to declare you a fraud, to strip you of your title and dissolve your bond with Thorn." Thorn's hand found Kira's, squeezing tightly. "Then she will not fail. We have 2 weeks. Teach her what she needs to know." But Althea was shaking her head, and there were tears in her ancient eyes. "You do not understand, Your Majesty. Opening the Gateway requires a sacrifice. The old texts are clear. To restore the connection between worlds, the lunar Queen must offer what she holds most precious, something of such value that its loss would break her. That is the price of power." Kira felt the world tilt. What she held most precious. There was only one answer to that. Thorn. The bond between them. Her mate. The sacrifice Queen Callista had spoken of in the vision. She would have to choose between her power and her love, between being the Lunar Queen and being Thorn's mate. The prophecy suddenly made terrible sense. Thorn would sacrifice his kingdom for her, and she would have to sacrifice him to claim her throne. The burning was not death, it was loss, and in that loss, the world would be remade. "No," Thorn's voice was absolute. "No, there has to be another way, another interpretation. I will not let her make that sacrifice." But Kira knew, with a certainty that went soul deep, that there was no other way. The moon goddess had set the terms centuries ago, and they were not negotiable. She could be Thorn's mate, bound to him. Forever, living in the shadows while Seraphine and others questioned her legitimacy. Or she could be the true Lunar Queen, with all the power and responsibility that entailed, but alone, without the bond that had become as essential to her as breathing. The choice was impossible, but it was hers to make. The final 2 weeks passed in a blur of desperate research and mounting dread. Thorn refused to accept the sacrifice, insisted there had to be a way to fulfill the ritual without severing their bond. Althea searched every text, every fragment of lore she could find. But the message was always the same. The gateway demanded the greatest sacrifice. And for Kira, that was Thorn. Seraphine, somehow sensing blood in the water, increased her campaign against Kira, rallying members of the council who were still skeptical, spreading doubt about whether someone so young, so inexperienced, could truly be the heir. The pressure mounted from all sides, until Kira felt like she could barely breathe. The night before the solstice ceremony, Kira stood on the balcony of Thorn's chambers, staring out at the city spread below. Behind her, she heard Thorn approach, felt his presence through the bond before his arms came around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "Whatever happens tomorrow," he said quietly, "know that I do not regret any of it. Finding you, claiming you, loving you. Even if we burn, it will have been worth it." Kira turned in his arms, looking up at his beloved face. "Thorn, I need to tell you something. About what I have decided." She felt him tense, felt his reluctance to hear this through the bond, but she pressed on. "I cannot ask you to give up your kingdom. Your people need you. The wolf world needs you. So tomorrow, when I face the gateway, I am going to offer the sacrifice. I am going to sever our bond. No." The word was flat, final. "I will not allow it. I would rather see the gateway remain closed. Rather let the council declare, than lose you." Kira cupped his face in her hands. "And I would rather endure a lifetime alone than watch you destroy yourself trying to protect me. Do you not see? This is the prophecy. You would sacrifice your kingdom for me. But I can sacrifice us for the kingdom. I can make the choice that saves everyone, even if it destroys me. That is what a true queen would do." Thorn's eyes blazed silver white, his wolf rising to the surface. "You are not just a queen. You are my mate. Mine. And I am not letting you go." His kiss was desperate, claiming, a physical argument against her decision, and Kira let herself sink into it, let herself memorize the feel of his lips, his hands, his heartbeat against hers. Because tomorrow, this would be memory. Tomorrow, she would make the choice that would break them both, but save the kingdom. Tomorrow, she would prove she was worthy of being the Lunar Queen, even if it cost her everything. The solstice ceremony was held in the ancient amphitheater at the heart of Lunaris, a structure carved from white stone so old it predated written records. Thousands of wolves gathered to witness, filling the circular seating that rose tier by tier around the central platform. The council sat in places of honor, with Seraphine positioned prominently among them, her ice-blue eyes fixed on Kira with predatory focus. Kira stood at the center of the platform, wearing the traditional robes of the Lunar Queens, white silk embroidered with silver, thread that matched the markings on her skin. Her hair had been woven with moonflowers, and around her neck hung a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. She looked every inch a queen, and inside, she was absolutely terrified. Thorn stood to the side, not on the platform, but close enough that she could see him, could feel him through the bond. He had not spoken to her since last night, had not accepted her decision, and the anguish radiating through their connection was almost unbearable. Althea approached, carrying an ancient text, and began to recite the ritual words in the old tongue. Kira understood them through the map, through the blood memory that ran in her veins. She was being asked to prove her worth, to demonstrate that she was the true heir of Queen Callista, to open the gateway of souls and restore the connection between worlds. The map on her arm began to glow, responding to the ceremonial words, and Kira felt power rise inside her like a tide. This was it. The moment. Everything changed. She closed her eyes and reached inward, toward the map, toward the legacy written in her skin. "Show me," she thought. "Show me the gateway. Show me how to fulfill my destiny." The map responded instantly, lines of light spreading from her arm across her entire body, illuminating her from within. The crowd gasped, and Kira opened her eyes to find she could see differently now. See the world as the Lunar Queens had seen it. The physical and spiritual realms overlapping, connected, by threads of power that ran through everything. And there, beneath the platform where she stood, she could see it. The gateway, a swirling vortex of silver light, sealed by chains of magic that had held for 3 centuries. To open it, she needed to break those chains. And to break the chains, she needed to offer the sacrifice. Her heart, her bond, her mate. Kira looked at Thorn, found him staring at her with such fierce love, such absolute devotion, that it nearly broke her resolve. She could stop this, could refuse, could walk away and live a life bound to him, even if it meant never claiming her true power. It would be enough. He would be enough. But then she thought of Seraphine's words. You are a liability. And she thought of all the wolves who needed a strong queen, who needed the balance restored, who needed someone willing to make the hard choices. She thought of the prophecy. He will sacrifice crown and kingdom for love. And she realized the only way to prevent that, to save him from himself, was to make the sacrifice herself. She turned to face the crowd, her voice ringing out clear and strong. I am Kira, daughter of the Lunar Queens, and I accept the price of power. She reached through the bond, that golden thread connecting her to Thorn, and began to sever it. The pain was instant and excruciating, like tearing her own heart from her chest. She heard Thorn roar, felt him surge forward, but Althea and the guards held him back as Kira forced herself to continue. Each breath was agony. Each heartbeat felt like it might be her last. But she did not stop, did not hesitate. She cut the bond, strand by strand, even as she felt Thorn's anguish mixing with her own, even as she heard him screaming her name. And the moment the final thread severed, the moment they were no longer connected, the chains around the gateway shattered. Silver light exploded upward from beneath the platform, a column of pure power that shot into the sky and tore through the veil between worlds. The crowd cried out in awe and terror as the spirit realm became visible, overlapping with the physical world in a dazzling display of magic. Kira stood at the center of it all, her entire body glowing, the map pulsing with power, and she heard a voice that was not quite sound, not quite thought. Well done, daughter of my daughter. You have proven yourself worthy. You chose duty over desire, the many over the one. You have earned the title of Lunar Queen. The voice was ancient, powerful, and unmistakably divine. The moon goddess herself. But Kira felt no triumph, no joy, only the terrible empty void where her bond with Thorn had been. She had succeeded. She had opened the gateway. She had proven she was the true heir. And the cost had been everything. As the light faded, as the gateway stabilized and the spirit realm settled back into harmony with the physical world, Kira collapsed to her knees. She was vaguely aware of the crowd erupting in cheers, of the council bowing before her, of Seraphine's expression of shock and grudging respect. But all she could focus on was Thorn, who had broken through the guards and was running toward her. He dropped to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms, and she felt nothing through the place where the bond had been. Just emptiness. Just loss. What have you done? Thorn whispered, and his voice was broken. What have you done? Kira looked up at him, seeing her own devastation reflected in his eyes. I saved you, she said simply. I saved all of us. This is what being queen means. This is the sacrifice. Then the darkness at the edges of her vision closed in completely, and she knew nothing more. Kira woke in a bed that was not her own, in a room she did not recognize. Her body ached in ways that had nothing to do with physical injury, a bone-deep exhaustion that spoke of magical depletion. She tried to sit up and found she barely had the strength. A figure moved in the shadows of the Room. And then Althea was there, pressing a cool hand to Kira's forehead. Easy, child. You have been unconscious for 2 days. Your body and soul are still recovering from the ritual. Thorn, Kira managed to say. Where is Thorn? Althea's expression turned sad. He has not left your side except when forced to attend to critical duties. But Kira, you need to understand. What you did, severing the bond, it hurt him terribly. And yourself. Broken mate bonds do not simply heal. The damage is permanent. Kira closed her eyes against the wave of grief. She had known the cost, had accepted it. But knowing intellectually that she would lose Thorn, and actually living in a world where she could not feel him, could not sense his presence, was 2 very different things. Does the council accept me now, as the Lunar Queen? Althea nodded. You opened the gateway. You fulfilled the prophecy. Even Seraphine cannot deny your legitimacy now. The coronation is scheduled for the new moon, 3 weeks from now. You will be crowned as the first Lunar Queen in 3 centuries. The words should have brought satisfaction, pride. Instead, Kira felt only hollowness. She had won. She had claimed her throne. And she had never felt more alone in her life. The door opened, and Thorn entered. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, his hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled as if he had been wearing them for days without changing. But when he saw Kira awake, relief flooded his features. And he crossed to the bed in quick strides. You are awake. Thank the moon. You are awake. He reached for her hand, and Kira let him take it, even though the contact was just physical now, empty of the bond that had once made every touch electric. Thorn, I am so sorry, she began, but he shook his head fiercely. Do not apologize for being brave, for choosing duty. I was selfish, trying to keep you for myself when you were meant for so much more. You did what you had to do. What a true queen would do. His voice cracked slightly. But moon above, Kira, it hurts. It hurts so much. Kira squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. I know. I feel it too. Or rather, I feel the absence of it. The place where you used to be is just empty now. But Thorn, this was the only way. If I had not severed the bond, you would have destroyed yourself, trying to protect me from the prophecy. This way, you are free. Free to rule without the weight of a mate bond that was supposed to kill you. Thorn's laugh was bitter. Free. Yes. I suppose I am free. Free to live with the knowledge that I found my perfect mate and lost her because of a cosmic joke. Because the moon goddess demanded sacrifice. Because being a king means never getting to keep what you love most. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. But I want you to know something. Bond or no bond, mate claim or no mate claim, I love you. I will always love you. And I will stand beside you as your king, as your partner, for as long as you will have me. We may not have the bond anymore, but we have choice. And I choose you. Every day. I will choose you. The words shattered something inside Kira, and she pulled him down into an embrace, burying her face in his shoulder as they both wept. For what they had lost. For what they had gained. For the impossible position the prophecy and the gateway had forced them into. They stayed like that, until Althea gently cleared her throat, reminding them they were not alone, and even then, Thorn was reluctant to let go. The weeks that followed were strange. Kira was crowned Lunar Queen in a ceremony that drew representatives from every wolf pack in the known world. She wore the silver crown that had been forged for Queen Callista herself, spoke the oaths that bound her to her people, and felt the weight of centuries settling onto her shoulders. She was everything her mother had told her she could never be. Powerful, recognized, royal, and yet the victory felt hollow without the bond, without that connection to Thorn that had made everything else bearable. They tried to make it work. Tried to be partners without the mate bond to tie them together. And in many ways, they succeeded. Thorn was an excellent advisor, helping Kira navigate court politics and establish her authority. Kira used the map to locate ancient sites of power, to reconnect with aspects of wolf magic that had been lost for centuries. Together, they began to rebuild what had been broken, to create a new order that honored both the old ways and the new. But without the bond, without that fundamental connection, there was always a distance between them, a gap that neither could cross. They shared a bed sometimes, seeking comfort in physical closeness. But it was not the same, could never be the same. And Seraphine, perhaps sensing weakness, continued to circle like a predator. She had pledged loyalty to Kira as the true queen, but her words were always carefully worded, her support conditional. She made it clear, in subtle ways, that she believed a queen without a mate bond was vulnerable, that Kira's sacrifice, while admirable, had left her incomplete. The council seemed to agree, pushing for Kira to take a formal consort, to secure the succession, to fully legitimize her rule through marriage. But Kira refused. She had sacrificed her bond with Thorn for this throne. She would not compound that loss by tying herself to someone else. 6 months after her coronation, on a night when the moon was dark and the palace was quiet, Kira stood once again on the balcony where she had made her decision, where she had told Thorn she would sever their bond. She felt his presence before she heard him. That familiar warmth that was no longer connected by golden threads, but was still, somehow, recognizable. He joined her at the railing, and for a long moment, they just stood in comfortable silence, looking out over the sleeping city. "Do you regret it?" Thorn finally asked. "The choice you made, the bond you broke." Kira considered the question carefully. Did she regret it? "No," she said slowly. "I regret the pain it caused. I regret what we lost, but I do not regret choosing duty over desire. The gateway needed to be opened. The balance needed to be restored. If I had chosen differently, if I had kept the bond and let the kingdom suffer, I would be haunted by that choice every day for the rest of my life. This way, at least I know I did the right thing. The hard thing. The thing a queen is supposed to do." Thorn nodded slowly. "I cannot say I do not regret it. I do. Every day. Every moment I am near you and cannot feel you through the bond. It is like losing you all over again. But I understand why you made the choice. And I respect it. You are everything a lunar queen should be, Kira. Strong. Brave. Willing to sacrifice for the greater good. I am proud of you, even if it breaks my heart." Kira turned to face him, reaching up to touch his cheek. "We could try, to rebuild something, without the bond. People have relationships without mate bonds all the time. We could choose each other, actively, deliberately, every day." Thorn covered her hand with his, leaning into the touch. "I would like that, I think. But Kira, I need to be honest with you. The broken bond has changed me. I am not the same man I was. There is a part of me that is just empty now, hollowed out where you used to be. I do not know if I can be what you need, what you deserve. You are exactly what I need," Kira said fiercely. "Bond or no bond. You are my partner, my king, my love. That has not changed just because the magic is gone. The choice to love you was never about the bond. It was about you, about who you are. And that has not changed either." Thorn pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, and Kira felt his breath hitch. "Then we will try," he whispered. "We will build something new. Ours, something that is not dictated by prophecy or magic or the demands of the moon goddess. Just ours." As they stood there, wrapped in each other's arms under the dark moon, Kira felt something shift inside her. Not the bond. That was truly gone, severed beyond repair. But something else. Something quieter but no less profound. Understanding. Acceptance. The knowledge that love did not always come in perfect packages, did not always follow the rules laid out by fate. Sometimes love was choosing each other, despite the obstacles, despite the pain, despite the broken pieces that could never quite fit back together the way they once had. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was what the prophecy had really meant. Not that loving each other would destroy them, but that it would transform them, remake them into something new, something harder, something real. The coronation of the Lunar Queen had saved the kingdom. The opening of the gateway had restored balance to the wolf world. And the sacrifice of the mate bond had proven that Kira was worthy of the crown she wore. But the story did not end with triumph and glory. It ended with two people standing on a balcony in the darkness, choosing each other without the benefit of magic, without the certainty of destiny. Just two souls who had found each other against all odds and refused to let go, even when the universe itself tried to pull them apart. That was the real power. That was the real magic. And as Thorn pressed a kiss to Kira's hair and she felt his warmth seep into her bones, she knew that somehow, despite everything, they were going to be all right. Not perfect. Not without pain. But together. Always together. And in the end, that was enough.